This is part 2 of a series I'm calling The Intimidator. This part is entitled Seeing What Can't Be Seen. Seeing what can't be seen. All of us have probably experienced intimidation in some form or fashion. Maybe some to a greater degree than others. But the enemy, our enemy, when I talk about the enemy, I'm talking about Satan, Lucifer, the devil, our enemy. One way he loves to intimidate us is by using the 5 senses that we have been given by God, which are great. The 5 senses, the smelling, the hearing, the seeing, touching, tasting, those are all gifts from God. But what the enemy does, and the only thing he can do, because he is not a creator, he always takes what the enemy has created and distorts it and tries to use it against us. And one of those senses we're going to look at today, one way the enemy loves to intimidate us is by what we see. What we see. He wants us to see things the way he sees things. Even as a FOJ, or a follower of Jesus, he wants us to see things his way. This morning, just think about, maybe you're up against the wall right now, and you feel like you're being intimidated, and there's fear. I want to ask you, how are you seeing that? What are you seeing? Am I seeing it his way? Or are we seeing it from God's perspective? So we're going to talk about seeing what you can't, or seeing what can't be seen. See, if my life is dominated by what I see, it's going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, for me to live by faith and trust Jesus. So how am I seeing what's happening in my life this morning? Right now. There's a challenge. There's an issue. Job loss. Strained relationship. Pressure on the job. School pressure. Someone just told me after the first service, she took this 100-question test. First time she took a test, she said, since she's out of high school. She was so intimidated. She said, I got panic attacks. I was getting sweaty about this. I wanted to do so well. Until she began to see it from a different perspective. And she said, you know what? It doesn't matter how well I do on this test. I took this class because I want to learn, and I have learned so much, so just put that to rest. And she said, I honestly was totally at peace about it. And she still doesn't know the outcome, she said. But it doesn't matter. She's seeing it from a different perspective now. See, the enemy wants us to see things through his grid. Am I cooperating with him? See, seeing it from God's perspective is what we call faith. In Hebrews 10:38, we read, the just must live by faith. Martin Luther took that and ran with it. And it revolutionized the church, his life. It became a revelation. I can't just operate on what I see. There's got to be something else to base my life on, and it's on what I can't see. Hebrews 11:1 in the New Living Translation reads, faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us assurance about things we cannot see. listen to this, out of the Message, Hebrews 11:1. The fundamental fact of existence is that this trust in God, this faith, is the firm foundation under everything that makes life worth living. And here it is. It's our handle on what we cannot see. It's believing that I have a handle, I have a stabilizer. Even though I can't see it, you can't see it, it's there, it's real, it's called faith. It's seeing things through a different grid. Before we go deeper into this series, I'd like for us to just pause for a moment and identify just one area in your life where the enemy right now, this morning, is intimidating you. See, this thing called intimidation isn't something that goes away when you reach a certain status in your walk with God. I mean, it is there every day. Some days it's a little more intense than others. But opportunities to be intimidated by what we see are all around us. So where are you at this morning? And here is the next question as it relates to that area, that event, that thing. What do you see happening right now? What do you see happening? See, when we are being intimidated by the enemy or by someone or something, we begin to see something happen. We begin to imagine something. That's what I'm talking about. What do you see happening? You're in the midst of a difficult relationship. Your marriage is on the rocks. What do you see happening? Something. You're seeing something. We see something. I've lost my job. What do you see happening? Do you see yourself homeless? Do you see yourself without a job forever? What do you see? This morning, I want to encourage us to see through God's perspective, to see through a different lens. Wow, you all look a little different when I take these glasses off. You look much better when I have them on. But what lens do you see things through this morning? See, every time we have this time, this moment, this opportunity in our life to be intimidated by the enemy, we immediately perceive something. We immediately begin seeing something. Do I see this as the end? It's all over. Or do I see it from a different perspective? What am I seeing? See, because what we are seeing will determine how we respond. I'm not necessarily talking about just what I'm looking at, but I'm talking about what I'm seeing. Beyond what I see. Here it is. Do I have the ability, can I, with God's help, see facts? Things that can't change. Facts. I'm not talking about denying facts. But with God's help, do I have the ability to see facts and see those facts through this lens? This faith lens. Do I see it through the faith grid or the fear grid? Remember last week we talked about the faith and fear factor. Do you see yourself trusting God and being at peace? Like our friend told me after the service. She's totally at peace about this now. It's like we can't remain neutral. We either see through this lens of God's helping me, or we see through a fearful lens which says there's no way out. Do you see it destroying you, or do you see it making you stronger? To help us respond in faith and not fear or intimidation, we must take a good hard look at what we see and what we're focused on. I love these verses. In Philippians, I'm only referring to them. You can jot it down and look at them sometime this week. Philippians 3:13 and 14. Paul, he said, this one thing I do, I forget those things that are behind me, and I press towards the prize. He says, I'm not going to focus on the past. I'm not going to focus on the pain, but I choose to focus on the prize. See, that's a choice that Paul made, and that's a choice that you and I can make. He could imagine the prize. Instead of imagining a different past, here's one for some of you. Instead of spending a lot of time, a lot of energy, imagining if your past would have only been different. Or if that wouldn't have happened, if that person wouldn't have came into my life, if I wouldn't have had that job, if I wouldn't have had that bad incident, if that event would have taken place. And people live their lives imagining their past if it were only better. And if we live our lives imagining a better past, again, the enemy has us right where he wants us because we cannot change that fact. We can't change where we were born. We can't change the past events of our lives. We can't do that. So here's my challenge. Here it is. Instead of imagining a different past, begin to imagine an incredible future. That's what I'm talking about. Now that's where we can make a difference. We can't do anything about the past in terms of changing it. What we can do with the past is learn from it and say, boy, that was horrible, but because of that, I'm a better person. That's how we work with our past. But to live in my past, wishing and thinking and praying and hoping it would be different, is a waste of time and energy. Paul said, forget it. Not that you never remember it. He's just saying, don't let it inhibit you from moving forward. So how do you see where you're at? How do you see your past? What are you focused on? Ephesians 3:20 in the Message reads this way. God can do anything, you know, far more than you could ever, there it is, imagine or guess or request in your wildest dreams. He does it not by pushing us around, but by working with us, His Spirit deeply and gently within us. Did you know that your imagination is a gift from God? It is. Use it freely. Spare no expense. Imagine. But here's where I want to encourage us. Use that imagination in a positive way, not in a negative way. See, let me just illustrate our imagination with this illustration. Right now, where you're at, think about your favorite, and this is so cool about our imagination. It's a great gift used in its proper context. Right now, imagine your favorite vacation spot. Oh, I feel it. Oh, yes. I'm down in Florida. Oh, it's a nice brisk morning. Ooh, I get goosebumps just going there in my imagination. I get up, head down to the walk down to the restaurant. It's a little chilly. It's usually in the month of March. And I get a cup of coffee. I get the newspaper, talk to a few folks. It's just a wonderful experience. Now, where is your favorite vacation spot? That's what we can do with our imagination. We even have the right to imagine. We've been encouraged to imagine. But use it in its right context. Start imagining your future. Stop imagining your past and how horrible it was. And, I could just imagine if that wouldn't have happened or this wouldn't have happened. Forget it. Start imagining living the life that God has planned for you. If you don't know what that is, imagine discovering it. Just start pretending like you know. Just imagine. Our imagination is a wonderful tool. Let's use it for His glory and for our benefit. How am I viewing or imagining that thing or that person that has been intimidating me? How am I viewing? How am I seeing? What am I imagining about that person? I can just imagine them falling off the face of the earth. Is that what you're imagining? Or can you begin to imagine things turning around, whether they do or not? I'm beginning to imagine myself actually kind of liking that person. Oh boy, what do you see and what are you focused on? See, we know what God has promised us, but we sometimes struggle. He's promised us peace and love and acceptance, and we try to imagine these things. He's promised us direction, purpose, wholeness, joy. He's promised us a way of escape every time we're tempted. He's promised to be with us. He's said, I'll give you a sound mind. But we struggle. And this morning, let's identify an area that we're struggling with. What is generating in my life this morning this intimidation? Is it your marriage? Is it because you're still single? You're imagining never getting married. Well, why can't you imagine finding the person of your dreams? You lost your job, and what are you imagining? What are you seeing? Well, I guess I'll never get a job again. You're imagining you're in debt, and you're imagining just getting deeper and deeper and deeper in debt, and things will never change, and I guess I'll never get out of debt. I'll just have to live with it. See, that's an imagination. Are you imagining your children doing poorly or doing great? On and on and on. Imagine your addiction. What are you seeing? What are you imagining? This is just something I guess I have to live with? Or are you imagining freedom, wholeness? See, let's identify one or two of these things that are in our lives that we're being intimidated. And then let's apply and practice the principles that we're going to be looking at in the next couple weeks. And insert these principles right into my situation. To help us this week and next, we're going to look into an old familiar story that most of us are familiar with. You'll find it in 1 Samuel 17, and I would encourage you this week to read this entire chapter, the story of David and Goliath. This is a great story. Go home this week sometime and look over it and read it. And we're going to look at how David responded to being intimidated, to being intimidated by Goliath. Remember, we're talking about intimidation by what we see. So, you'll find it in 1 Samuel 17. I want to just set up the story quickly. Here is, and by the way, I want to, as we go through this story, I want to pull out faith nuggets. Little nuggets that we can hold on to, okay? So here we go. The Philistines were enemies of Israel and had positioned themselves for battle against each other. Here you had the Philistines on top of one mountain. You had the children of Israel, the Israelites, on the top of another mountain, and there was this valley named Elah between them. So put yourself there. Two large armies, thousands of men in each army, and they're getting ready to do battle. When I don't know how all this went down, but this is what seems to happen. Just before they started attacking each other, someone comes up with this brilliant idea. I don't remember seeing this anywhere else in Scripture. I'm sure it seemed a bit strange, but it changed the battle plan completely. And here was the plan. The Philistines said, the enemy said, I'll tell you what, instead of two armies duking it out and thousands of men being killed, why don't we send their strongest man out? You send your strongest man, we will send our strongest man, and the winner or the loser become the slaves of the winner. Okay? You got that? And I'm imagining now, the Israelites thought, doesn't sound bad. I mean, it makes sense. Instead of thousands dying, only one man dies. And we got a shot at this. We got some pretty tough guys, the Israelites were thinking. And when the plan, now imagine, this was, they didn't have no PA system, so now this new plan is spreading throughout the army, and they're hearing this, and they're like, yeah, where's so-and-so? How about so-and-so? Let's get him out there. Let's go. This is great. And the sound, or the plan sounded appealing. Only one man dies. It's different, but I like it. And here's my first point. The enemy's plans always initially sound appealing. Oh, you got to get that. The enemy's plans always sound appealing. He doesn't present a plan that doesn't sound appealing or doable, or a plan that I can manage. It sounds great. His plan goes something like this. If you do this, I will do that for you. If you do what I suggest, you will actually be cool at school. If you do what I want you to do, you will be accepted among your peers. If you do what I want you to do, you will be loved, you will even get rich, and most importantly, you will be happy. If you follow my plan, things will work out for you. But if you hear nothing else, hear this. When he presents a plan, you can count on it. There is always a giant in the shadows that is ready to intimidate and destroy you. Every time. It only looks appealing. The enemy always has a giant ready because he loves to exaggerate, he loves to exploit, he loves to magnify, distort, and deceive. He is a con man. And every plan initially that he presents to us is like, well, now that makes sense. I could do that, or I should do that. Then, after all the chatter and the Israelites were warming up to this idea, then out steps Goliath. And let's read what Goliath looked like. We're talking about being intimidated by what you see. 1 Samuel 17, 4-7. Then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. They probably had him in hiding until they got this plan down. He was over 9, that's just a little taller than me, 9 feet tall. He also wore bronze leg armor, and he carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. His armor bearer, who walked in front of him, walked ahead of him carrying a shield, like he needed more protection. And this is what Goliath may have looked like in comparison to David. I want to show you what he may have looked like. Come on out, Goliath. Now, don't fall, Goliath, please. This is what David, pretty realistically, 9 feet. Jared is about 9 feet, a little taller. Can you imagine how David felt? And how all of a sudden, this plan that looked so appealing wasn't very appealing anymore. And Jared, I just want you to stay right there, Jared, and I want you to visualize what David was up against as we move on here through this story. They thought they could handle things until they saw what they were up against. Wow, does that sound familiar? We too. The initial plan? No problem. I can handle that. We too think we can handle things initially. But then, here we go. Things get out of hand. We find ourselves addicted. Oh man, I never thought that would happen. Or we find ourselves in debt when, man, it was just, come on, we just go shopping once in a while and enjoyed it, and before we knew it, we were in over our heads. Or we can't find our way back now. We've gone so far. Or now we have this unplanned pregnancy. When, man, that wasn't part of the plan. I didn't see that coming. Or, something I would have never done. There was this shady deal that I did one time as a business person. I knew it was shady, but man, I couldn't resist. I made some quick money, but now I find myself doing it all the time, and I can't quit. I'm doing things that I can't believe I'm doing. See, what seems so small and insignificant, and I didn't think it would hurt, it sounded appealing, it turned into this monster. See, I thought it was going to just be a one-night stand. And now it's happening on a regular basis. I thought it was only going to be one beer. Now I can't control it. I thought it was only going to be one look into pornography. But now it's out of control. I started, it looked so appealing and it looked so appropriate. I just started telling these little lies. But now my life is one big lie. And I got this monster. I feel now like I'm up against a 9-foot-tall monster, and I can't do anything about it. See, the purpose in bringing Goliath out for the children of Israel was to intimidate them by what they see. The enemy wanted to defeat them just by what they saw. And he tries to do the same thing for us. If I could just get you to think and to see yourself as totally defeated, he knows you're done. What are you seeing this morning? What grid are you looking through? is the only thing you see this morning the monster? If that's all you see and that's all you're imagining, nothing will change. I've got to change what I see. I've got to begin to believe that God's got some wonderful things in store for me. In spite of these issues, in spite of my life, in spite of what I'm going through, I've got to begin to imagine there's hope, there's help. I can be free from the monster in me. See, what you see is important. I'm not talking about denying reality. What we are up against is very real, and it's important to be in touch with that. But how you interpret what you see is absolutely critical. How are you interpreting what you see? Facts are facts. These are the facts. David said, man, 9'2"? But what did David see? We're going to talk about that next week. You don't want to miss the next week. Oh, I can't wait till next week. What do you see? Here it is. We may all be seeing the same thing. But what God is looking for from us, what God is looking for are people who will take what they see and interpret it into what He sees. How does God see your situation? We got to get this. We got to get this. How does God see your situation? Is God a... How did you get yourself in that situation, man? I'm sorry, but I can't help you. That's a toughie. I've never seen one like that. You're on your own. No way. God is saying, I will help you. I am with you. I have not forgotten you. I have not forsaken you. I have a wonderful plan for you. And by the way, you know how God sees you this morning? He sees you clean. He sees you righteous. He sees you cool and the best thing since sliced bread. Amen. That's how He sees you. But we have got to see ourselves through that same grid. We've got to get focused. We've got to get away from just seeing the monster and begin to see my situation, how He sees it. So how are you interpreting what you see this morning? How are you interpreting it? Because how you see it is what makes all the difference. David saw what the entire army saw. Little David. He was referred to in one translation, he was just a runt. Remember when David was overlooked when they went to anoint the next king of Israel? The high priest Samuel went to Jesse's house, and these boys marched out in front of Jesse, their dad, and all the boys marched through the line, and the high priest Jesse said, oh, is this all you guys? Is there anybody else in the house? Did you forget someone? He said, oh, little David. Yeah, bring David up. That's David, this little runt. David saw what the entire army saw, but he interpreted the facts differently. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. We're going to look at how David responded. And before there's a disconnect, before you go home and say, oh, David, that was David and the Goliath story, and that was cool, and man, it is closer to us than that. I want to just whet your appetite a little bit. David did not overcome the monster just because he was this great man of faith. I cannot wait to get into this. I cannot wait. There were some other factors that motivated David. Maybe you can pick up on them. Go home and read the story. It's interesting. Oh, I want to get into it, but I can't. In other words, don't think, well, David was this huge man of God and he withstood the monster and the giant and that's how he did it. Oh, no, no, no. Now, that was a part of it. But here, I'm going to just skirt around it a little bit. You know what David also did? He began to see his life and what his life would be like after the monster was killed. Oh, that is so powerful. You understand that it wasn't that David, now he was a man after God's own heart. We all know that, but he also blew it many times, didn't he? I mean, this guy he had his ups and downs and ins and outs, to say the least. But one thing is very clear in 1 Samuel 17 is he began to imagine. He began to imagine what his life would be like when the monster was gone. And folks, we have got to do the same, and we can. What are you looking at? What do you see? Do you see? Are you able to see what you can't see or what can't be seen? Are you able to do that? Or are you so focused on the monster, the giant, that's all you can see? Oh, I want to encourage us to look beyond that, to see it, identify it, but say, you know what? I see something else that not everyone else can see, but I see it. Stand with me this morning as we close in prayer.